Hello, thank you for joining me. Today I will be discussing the pros and cons of using Windows versus Linux in business operations and for personal use. What are Windows and Linux? First, we must understand the basics of operating systems. An operating system is a software platform that sits on top of other programs. Operating systems essentially tell a computer what to do by managing its functions. These functions include controlling peripheral devices and executing applications. Operating systems are also responsible for the security of the computer by controlling which users have access to the system. By acting as the intermediary between the computer and user, the operating system interprets input from user devices, mouse and keyboard, and sends output to be displayed to the monitor. Next, I will introduce Windows operating system. Windows was first introduced November 20th, 1985 by Microsoft Corporation as an extension of the MS-DOS with a graphical user interface. It was essentially just a desktop environment for the MS-DOS and didn't become a full-fledged operating system until 1995. Windows first allowed users to point and select icons by clicking on them rather than type in complicated and tedious commands. Today, Windows is regarded as the standard option for business operations. Now, let's elaborate on the best and the worst of Windows by evaluating its pros and cons. Pros. Windows is popular for both business and personal use. The reason for this can be traced back to its user-friendliness. Most people are familiar with Windows due to its prevalent market presence and relatively ease of use in comparison to its more technical rival Linux. Most software being developed is for the Windows platform, so finding great software to suit your needs is very easy. Technical support is readily available with Windows. Because of Windows' massive popularity, someone somewhere has probably already come across whatever problem you are dealing with. It is easy to find hardware and drivers for a Windows-based computer since most software is written to run on Windows software platform. Windows can also be updated without the fear of losing compatibility with other older installed programs. The cons of Windows. Windows is one of the least secure operating systems. Since Windows is so prevalent in the desktop market, viruses are more commonly written for Windows. One should definitely not skimp out on antivirus protectionware. Windows uses heavy resources to fulfill its functions, making it slower than other operating systems as a result. A Windows-based machine may need greater memory and disk space, as well as a faster processor as a result. Windows has poor stability. This means that Windows needs to be constantly updated, and for many of these updates, the machine will need to be rebooted frequently. This con is a specific reason why Windows is a poor option to use as an operating system for a server. Because Windows is closed source, it costs money. When a new version of Windows comes out, an organization may want to update all of their computers. This process is very expensive, as Microsoft frequently checks if a user's computer is using a verified or paid-for version of Windows. Microsoft also requires organizations to have licenses to use their products. And yes, this also costs more money. Next, I will introduce Linux. Linux. This operating system first came to be in the spring of 1969 as Unix, which wasn't open source. As a result, users in the 1980s who wanted to modify code and redistribute it created an alternative operating system similar to Unix called Minix. In 1991, Unix was renamed to Linux after Linus Torvalds, who influenced the development of the product by creating a replacement for the user-made Unix alternative, Minix. Linux is an open source software. This means that the product is free to download and users may modify the code and redistribute it. There are no licensing restrictions on Linux users, making it a favorable option for more technical users who like to greatly enhance or customize their operating systems themselves. Linux is actually only a kernel, meaning alone. It is not a full operating system, as a kernel only controls memory usage and the CPU. Kernels run behind the scenes, and users never actually directly interact with it. This means that additional software bundles need to be downloaded. These bundles include Ubuntu, Mint, and Fedora. Now I will discuss the pros and cons of Linux. Pros. Linux is an open source software. Users can modify the software and redistribute it. Linux kernel and its software bundles are 100% free to download. If money is a huge concern for an organization or personal user, consider trying Linux. Linux is very flexible and customizable since users can change what they want. Linux is quite secure. Because of Windows' huge desktop market share, most malware is written to harm Windows computers. Linux is reliable. Linux does not have to be rebooted when updated. This makes it a favorable option as an operating system for a server. Linux does not need to use the huge resources that a Windows operating system does. Linux simply takes up less space and uses less memory. Cons. Less people are familiar with Linux. Linux tends to require more skills out of its users, so it is more complicated for a non-technical user. Linux is a lot less common than Windows, and it only holds about 1 to 2% of the desktop market share. There are less programs written for Linux since most software is written to run on the Windows platform. It may take a while before very popular software is available to use on a Linux-based system. Less hardware devices and drivers are compatible with Linux unless they have driver support pre-installed. The real-world application of Windows versus Linux in the enterprise. What do businesses need, and which operating system will suit them best? Businesses need an operating system to suit their needs. If an organization is looking for server stability, say for a social media giant such as Facebook or Twitter, they're going to need to have an operating system on those servers that can stay on virtually 24/7. They're also going to want to reboot them as little as possible and be able to handle extremely large traffic. For servers, Linux is insurmountably the best option. If an organization is looking to cut their costs, they may also want to look into Linux. Since Linux is open source, it does not require money to be acquired, nor does it require businesses to obtain a license for use. If an organization is looking for familiarity and ease of use for its desktop computers, then the organization should look for Windows-based computers. Most people know how to operate a Windows-based computer because it is so popular. In a nutshell, Windows is the best option for desktop computers as most users are familiar with it. Windows is closed source and expensive, so if money is a concern, you may want to learn to navigate a Linux-based computer. More software is developed for Windows, so if your concern lies with wanting to quickly have the greatest and most popular software available, consider Windows. But remember, Windows is a lot less secure than other operating systems due to the huge amount of people who use it. And for Linux, it is the preferred option for servers since it is stable and able to handle large traffic. It may save an organization millions of dollars since it is free and there are no licensing restrictions. But remember that Linux is less compatible and a lot of software is mostly written for Windows. A user may need to be more computer savvy to troubleshoot their problems. There may be helpful forums online, though, to help you understand how to get the most out of Linux. And lastly, Linux is one of the more secure options for an operating system since less malware is written for it. I hope you've gained new information regarding Windows and Linux-based operating systems as we've evaluated the pros and cons of using Windows versus Linux in the enterprise and for personal use. Thank you for watching.